name of the song, actually, but I sold it to the producers for £25, which I think may well be illegal to do that now. And I'm just in a party scene, strumming away in the corner of a room while the story goes on. It's a pretty dreadful film, but I'm showing it only because maybe you've got a sense of humour, those of you that are watching this. And at the same time, I was doing a lot of backing singing, and I'm going to show you an example of this. Oh no, haha, before we go into backing singing, here's another film I did. I must have been just 17, The Lost Continent. Well, I mean, it was originally an old Dennis Wheatley book called Uncharted Seas. I was employed by them. Well, they took me because they knew I'd been water ski champion, and I had to actually be in this film wearing two huge balloons on my shoulders. Sadly, haven't got a picture of that. It's in the book, I think. And these two huge balloons, plus my cleavage, meant that when I went to see the film, when it finally came out at the ABC Fulham Road, when I appear on the screen, the whole audience cracks up with laughter, me too, because it's really unreal. And I'm wearing these weird things on my feet because I had to walk on this man-eating seaweed that would kill people. And I mean, it was a fantasy film. Don't forget, this was years before computer-generated films came out. There was a men inside these old animals that were kind of got claws going up and down. It was quite funny. If you ever see it, and it sometimes appears at 3 o'clock in the morning when most people should be asleep, it's a slightly cult movie. It's got Hildegard Knef, Eric Porter, trying to think of it. Anyway, that's just, if you've got nothing else to do, watch this mad film. But at the same time of doing some films, and let's face it, I said yes to any old film because I needed the work and I got experience. And the other thing I did was, there you can see me with lovely Elton John, but on the left, you can see when I think he was still Reg Dwight. And it says Top of
Metti da
the
bere?
Pops. The thing about Top of the Pops was Elton and I
Guarda
and
Danna con
another
Elton
singer called
John.
David Byron, who was the lead singer of Uriah Heep, were employed for a company called Avenue Recordings, and we would go in and make the top 20 hits and do cover versions, because in those days there were no you would sit, if you wanted to go to a coffee bar, which was a new thing anyway, maybe there'd be a tannoy, and in order to pay less money to the original artists, you do an LP with these cover versions on. And so Elton and I and David Byron used to do all these cover versions, and I actually have almost forgotten the amount of songs that I was on, but in those days it was fantastic. We got paid £25 a week, a track as a backing singer, and then if you did the lead vocal, you got 50 quid. Now that was huge mega bucks in those days, and it was just so nice that Elton and I got on very well, and I'm so pleased that there's somebody who's done extremely well. But during this whole time, I was still staying very much in touch with David Bowie, and he always used to say, what we really need is a manager, but we also needed work. So I went and joined, I did a few out of London shows, but I went and did this thing you can see, Catch My Soul, the rock Othello, to which Bowie and his then wife Angie came to. I think they quite enjoyed it. But Catch My Soul was the first rock opera that had ever been done. It starred a man called Jack Good, who was a white guy, so he had to black up every night. I don't think you'd be allowed to do that now, but don't forget, this is those days. I think this might have been 1970. And it was really rather groundbreaking. We opened we were in Manchester, then we moved to the Roundhouse, and then finally landed up at the Prince of Wales Theatre, I think it was. And the man on the right is PJ Fogarty. Now, if you're old enough, you will remember that he had #1 hits with, one song was There's a Place Somewhere, or Maria, two songs from West Side Story. He always came on stage dressed as a slightly Beau Brummel type, but he suddenly got infamous because he did two different concerts where he split his trousers, shock horror.
Pronto?
Nowadays, who would even give a damn? but in those days they did. So while all of this was going on, and it was a great, great show actually, because in between the real Shakespeare, as in, the real Shakespeare words, suddenly everything would burst into a rock song, and all the people on stage, myself included, who had the most outrageous costume of everyone on the stage, we all would be gyrating and dancing about. And at the same time, I was writing my songs. I'd had my 2 LPs out, and my dream was to get another record deal because I knew I had to move on from Decca Records. And here you will see me. I can't exactly remember the year. It must have been 1971, maybe. On the right, of course, is David Bowie, long hair. I'm on the left. I've obviously just come back from Mystique because I'm very brown and, as usual, bursting out of a top. And in the middle was our wonderful manager, Tony DeFries. Bowie had rung up and he'd said, listen, I think I found the man who's the perfect manager for us both. And he and his then wife, Angie, went to meet DeFries, who had a legal mind, and they both said, well, especially Bowie said to me, this is the guy. So I was introduced to DeFries, and of course I adored the man because he did the one thing that I've always loved in any man, and in this case he was he had a great Jewish brain, he was legal. So he just said to me, let me take care of everything. And of course Bowie and I went, yeah, bring it on. So suddenly we were able to record where we wanted. We got all the best musicians. But this actual picture was taken, I think, at the Roundhouse. It was at backstage of a strange Andy Warhol show called Pork. And the people who were in Pork then later on became the people that worked for Tony DeFries and toured as the tour manager with Bowie. But this was the start of the company called Main Man. And so Main Man organised that Bowie and I, here we are together, me still with my long hair with the hippie look, and him still with his long hair, both playing our 12-string guitars, both rather folky. And then, of course, Bowie met the wonderful guitarist Mick Ronson, or had him come down from Hull, and the rest of the band, which was Trevor Bolger and Woody Woodmansey, turned into the Spiders from Mars. And these pictures were taken, actually the one on the right, doesn't it look lovely? He's got his arms round me. We were really good friends. I never expected, you don't expect musicians to be faithful or anything. I've always said I never wanted to be Mrs. Bowie or Mrs. Jones. We were just having a good time. But the best thing of it all is that we were involved musically. And then, of course, by this time, we had the same management company. The picture in the middle is of something that's called the Bow Promo. There were 500 copies, specially printed, of Bowie on one side and my songs on the other. These were printed to go and try and get a record deal because we needed a good album deal. And if anybody has got, this is a bootleg, the one with a picture of me on it, so I wouldn't bother to waste your money on it actually. If you got the actual original one, it was plain with just handwritten saying David Bowie and Dana Gillespie. And these ones go for thousands because there's Bowie fans all over the world who collect, I think it's just called Bowie Collectabilities. I have one copy which I store under my bed. So I've always said if I die, I've got to rush and quickly grab this thing. So that's the start of the recording sessions actually that I'd done at Trident Studios with Bowie. We were in the studios at the same time. We had different producers, but we had Rick Wakeman on piano and Mick Ronson. And at the same time, I was needing to make a living. Bowie and I had auditioned for Hair. We both got turned down, strangely enough. But I landed up as Mary Magdalene in Jesus Christ Superstar. It was the original first ever live show. There'd been a concert show of Jesus Christ Superstar. But I would always have this feeling that I was meant to be Mary, and that I just felt like I was Mary Magdalene. Of course, I got to sing that song. I don't know how to love him every night for 8 shows a week for a year. And it was groundbreaking stuff. I remember, well, that's Paul Nicholas who played Jesus lying in my lap. And during rehearsals, we had to fight our way through picketing nuns who would be outside the stage door saying blasphemy, etc. But once the show opened at the Palace Theatre, which I think is almost the biggest theatre in London, I think it was the Archbishop of Canterbury had gone to see the show, had given it a thumbs up, and from that moment on, it was packed every night for the next 30 years. I left actually after a year because I had to leave because it was time for my knee operation, which had been damaged in the avalanche when I was younger. But here you can see the theatre. I mean, it's a great theatre. It's a lovely theatre. I had the ground floor dressing room just at the side of the stage, in other words, the Stars dressing room. And on the right, you can see the various people. There's Jesus in the front. Just to the left of him, holding a microphone, is my lovely friend who's sadly not on this planet anymore, Paul Jabara, but he wrote It's Raining Men, one of the great songs. And it was a fantastic performance, and of course I'm there still with my hippie hairdo. And while the show was going on, we did a performance that went over Christmas. So there was a big television show on the BBC in those days called Till Death Us Do Part, starring the man in the middle, an absolute bigot his character was, Alf Garnett, played wonderfully by Warren Mitchell. So in it, Alf Garnett goes to see Jesus Christ Superstar with his wife, who he always called the silly old Moo, and his daughter, who was married to an actor called Tony Booth. Anyway, they go and see Jesus Christ Superstar, and after the show, they go into the famous Coach and Horses, the pub round the corner, where all the actors used to go in there. It's actually where, if anyone has seen that wonderful show, Geoffrey Barnard is Unwell, that Peter O'Toole starred in, that's where it was set, in the Coach and Horses. So there I am, as usual, busty, with Alf Garnett staring at my bust and Paul Nicholas as Jesus on my left. But I knew that I had to leave Superstar because it was time to go, and it was time to go actually to America. I'd finished my album, Weren't Born a Man, and here I am. Well, here are the Polaroids, actually. De Vries, who's on the left, Tony De Vries, I reiterate, the wonderful manager, because for 5 years he really looked after everyone. Bowie, there's me. Mick Ronson, for some reason, seems to be sitting on my lap. I don't know how that happened. And of course, on the right is Angie Bowie, who was also very, very instrumental in helping Bowie to get to the state, well, obviously now, but the first 5 years to get him off the planet and move him to America. De Vries and Angie were very, very instrumental in this, and De Vries gave me a Polaroid camera. Now against today's instant pictures, it's nothing, but he gave me this Polaroid, so you'll see a lot of Polaroids coming up. And here I am, hanging out with the Bowies, and little Zoe, as he was known then. He then changed his name to Joey, and he's actually called Duncan Jones now, and he's a filmmaker. But we just hung out together, and of course we moved to America. But before we left, there's Angie, there's Mark Bolan. Well, Bowie and Mark Bolan were absolutely really good friends. They always used to invent some fictitious story that there was rivalry between Bolan and Bowie. There wasn't. I never saw it. They used to come round to my place when into Thurlow Square, and it'd be quite often that it'd be Bowie and Bolan and Angie often sitting on the floor over my recording machine while they'd be writing songs. I even recorded some of their songs, but I'm embarrassed to say I don't know where the tape is anymore. It's probably got lost in the eons of time. So there's a lot of Polaroids that you'll see in this show presentation, and I used to write their names underneath, so that's my writing underneath the Polaroids. So let's move on. By this time, Tony DeFries started the company called Main Man. That's the great logo. We all had T-shirts, we all had stickers. That was one of my stickers. And we all had postcards. And Tony DeFries had said, if we really want to get on in life, we have to travel through life first class. So um, at that time, I had also, my album, Weren't Born a Man, had come out. Whoops, there I am. Now, I've met many a man that used to say they bought this album because they loved the picture, taken, of course, by Gerard Mankiewicz. And again, rather tame by today's standards, but in those days, I think I was the first girl singer to appear in stockings and a corset on the cover of an album, RCA Records. But this was exactly at the same time that Bowie was on the cover of his, I think it was his Hunky Dory album, or was it Man Who Sold the World? Yeah, anyway, he was wearing a dress. So Main Man was quite edgy, and actually, this explains why Weren't Born a Man, why my memoirs is called Weren't Born a Man, because a lot of men used to buy this album, and they told me that they used to buy it and then ask for a brown paper bag to carry it home so they wouldn't be seen clutching what might have been close to being slightly kind of too horny for them to take anywhere. But the music inside had this song, Andy Warhol, which Bowie himself had written for me. And if you listen to it, you can hear Bowie's voice, because he was my backing singer on that, and he's, of course, strumming his guitar. And then he did his version of it. And while he was kind of making great waves, I was doing Jesus Christ Superstar most nights, well, every night. So I couldn't go out and party. But there is the famous party. It's known always actually as the Last Supper. But there you can see on the right me and Bowie sitting next to each other. And on the left there's Bowie, Jeff Beck, Mick Ronson. But in fact there are quite a lot of pictures, which include, I think it was Jagger was there, Lou Reed, loads of people were there. It was a big thing. And I think it was the same night that Bowie stepped out on stage at Hammersmith and announced that Ziggy Stardust was never going to perform again. Or was it the Rainbow Theatre? You have to buy the memoirs, I'm afraid, and you'll get the facts right. Because, I'm very, very bad with dates, but it was a fantastic party. And then, of course, Bowie took off for America because his album was out, and I had to still finish Weren't Born a Man. So I, in a moment of madness, I was offered to audition at the National Theatre. So here you can see the top in black and white. There's Sir John Gielgud, who played Prospero. On the top right is Peter Hall, Sir Peter Hall, and I went to audition for him. And he gave me a copy of, The Tempest, because it was to audition for The Tempest. He said, read this, and it was for the part of Juno, who was considered all things good to men. Well, I do know a bit about that. So I read it. Of course, I'm pretty hopeless, because I don't ever really consider myself an actress. I've always thought of myself as a musician first. I wasn't very good, and I said to him at the end, this isn't very good.
No, già mezz'ora.
It wasn't very good.
È brava.
And let's face it,
È
you've got to
anziana
be
ma
of the ilk of Sir
tostissima,
John
mazza.
Gielgud to do
Pure Marianne Faithfull
Shakespeare
ha superato il
justice.
Covid.
So then,
Ste
Sir
donne
Peter,
sono toste.
as he was called,
Sarà che hanno passato di
handed me
tutto.
back the book and he said, okay, sing it now. And I sang exactly the same words, just invented a melody. And the moment I added music to it took off. I was
No,
really
ha
good.
voglia.
Said straight
In
away,
Inghilterra,
"Art
voglia
is
quanta
yours."
gente sta guardando.
And the reason why you see Julie Covington, who of course had the huge hit with Don't Cry for Me Argentina, myself and Jenny Agutter, who everyone remembers now from Call the Midwife, we shared a dressing room because Julie and I had to be in this sort of fantasy sequence, hence the rather peculiar costume and rather strange clothes. So I stuck that out. I did that while Main Man, by this time, Bowie and Angie and everyone had moved to New York, and I was desperate to go. And then, of course, once I get to New York, and once I'd finished my stint at the National Theatre, having realised that acting really isn't for me, I knew nobody was ever going to offer me any parts except for things with plunging necklines and chamois leather and cave girls and pterodactyls and dinosaurs. Off I went to New York, and David and Angie were staying in the Sherry Netherlands Hotel, and I moved in with them. And of course, Zoe, the baby, was there, and Marion, the nanny, and there was a few other rooms. People were coming and going. We were there for, it felt like months, having a whale of a time, as only one can do when in New York. And I mean, there you can see on the right, there's Bowie and Mick Jagger, because he used to be a regular visitor. He used to stay around the corner in the plaza, and there you can see him again. Sorry, the picture on the left is Mick. I don't know what happened to the Polaroid. It seemed to kind of melt on the top. But I just used to take loads of pictures. On the right, of course, is Jagger and Angie, because he'd come round and visit me and Angie when Bowie was out on the tiles somewhere. And there, the one in the middle is Jeff McCormack, who was Bowie's backing singer for many years, and then was also in the fantastic Diamond Dogs tour show that sadly nobody in England ever saw, but it has to be, and I've said this over and over again, one of the greatest shows ever, but it never came to England. So these are all my personal collection of Polaroids. And there I am. Well, Angie, of course, used to love dressing me up, and David, I mean, because she was great with clothes. I've always said, left to my own devices, I'd just be in a pair of jeans and a shirt. So I'm wearing an outfit designed by a woman called Natasha Korniloff, who used to design Bowie's clothes too. So Bowie had demanded that he had a grand piano put into his suite in the hotel. So there I am, as it says, propping up the piano. There's Zoe, sweet little boy, and there's David. I don't know why he's got that hat on, but he must have had it on for some reason. And around this time too, I was flitting between London and New York. I had done this album, Ain't Gonna Play No Second Fiddle. There's the Andy Warhol picture on the front. I've still got another version of the picture here in my kitchen, actually. And I had a different feel for music by then. I was already getting into blues, and Ain't Gonna Play No Second Fiddle is actually an old Bessie Smith song. And although this was a Main Man and RCA production with great pictures on the back of it, again, Polaroids, and, this album, I was very pleased with this. A lot of the songs, nearly all of them, bar two of the songs, were my own compositions. So this was my fourth LP, and I suppose this came out in about 1974. And at this time, we were all still in New York, and as you can see, I'm singing in a place called Reno Sweeney's, which was a hot, trendy place in those days. On the right, you can see myself standing face to face with Raquel Welch, the older lot of you'll remember that she was a huge film star. And in the middle, actually, in a fur coat, was DeFreeze's then girlfriend, Melanie. And below is Raquel, or the Rack, as we used to call her, actually not to her face. But there was one night in Reno Sweeney's where literally in the audience was Raquel, Bowie, Dylan, Bette Midler, Janet Leigh, I think Tony Curtis. The list was endless, and I was performing. It was a bit of a star-studded evening, and it had been really well kind of advertised all over the place. But by this time, Main Man and Bowie was starting to have a bit of a fallout. I mean, it's well documented, and I write about it in a bit more detail. I don't want to go into it now. It's in the book. Buy the book is all I can say. So the company kind of folded. Bowie stayed in America. I went back to England, and because there was litigation going on, I couldn't record for anyone for a few years, so I moved into film. And there you can see me in a Ken Russell film, Marla. On the right, you can see I'm sitting next to Robert Powell, who plays Marla, and it's a rather curious film for those of you who've seen it. I play Anna von Mildenberg, Marla's opera-singing mistress, and in it, I actually get the chance to write a song for the film, which I sing. Anyway, I did quite a few films. Here's another film that I did. No, oh yes, no, I did a musical as well while the litigation was going on because I couldn't record for anyone. This Mardi Gras was, I had to play a kind of a black courtesan, a hooker basically, but they couldn't find any black blues singers in town, so they took me because she had to be a blues singer. So in order to get round the race card without upsetting too many people, they said I was an octoroon, in other words, 1/8 black. So that's what I do. I sing blues. Not many people do these days, but I still do. And then I did another epic film, The People That Time Forgot, or as I used to jokingly call it, the film that people forgot. It was part of a trilogy. This is part 2. And there I am, cave girl, chamois leather as usual, with Doug McClure. And the picture on the right shows me with an actor called Milton Reed. And I'm about to be sacrificed into the volcano, but I get saved at the last minute. It's all, again, pre-computer generated stuff, but pretty good if you like your early fantasy films. Um, anyway, then I went on and did another film. This was actually a whole load of fun. The Hound of the Baskervilles. Peter Cook and Dudley Moore. Um, I have written sort of about this. I have to play, the man on the top right is a fantastic actor called Hugh Griffiths, and I had to play his mistress, his girlfriend, or his other half. And Dudley meets me, and of course everyone knows that Dudley was rather small, so he only came up to the height of my cleavage. Spent the whole time getting lost down my cleavage. And the picture on the bottom right, the black and white picture, on the right-hand side, wearing hats, you can see Peter Cook as Sherlock, because he's got the Sherlock deerstalker hat on. Dudley Moore is Watson, and then there's Terry Thomas, Joan Greenwood, Denham Elliott, and I can't remember if it's Hugh Griffiths, and The Hound is somewhere on the left. It was a total disaster film, but if anyone sees it, it's worth seeing because you've got the cream of all the British actors. Then I did another film, directed by Nicholas Roeg, Bad Timing, and there I am with Art Garfunkel. I have a bed scene with Art Garfunkel. My only time ever on a bed scene. I said to Nick Roeg, I've never met Art Garfunkel. You better introduce us because we're going to be in bed together very shortly. So I was introduced to him, and the film came out. And it's strange because Bowie also did a Nick Roeg film, which was, of course, The Man Who Fell to Earth. But Bad Timing was an odd sort of love story about necrophilia. I won't go into it more, but if you want to watch something strange, watch that. Then, well, this is just a sort of mad photo. On the right, of course, is Keith Moon, who I used to know quite well in the early days, because I remember The Who playing in The Who, which he was the drummer of, playing in the Marquee Club before they were The Who. They were called the High Numbers then. But he and I hung out a lot together. He was a complete nutter. So was my dear, dear, dear friend on the left, Lionel Bart, who wrote Oliver, which has to be one of my favourite musicals of all time. And Lionel lived round the corner from me in South Kensington, and we used to meet regularly in the little Polish restaurant, the Duckies, because that was equidistance between our two places. And I've got many, many adventures with both these naughty men in my memoirs. Get it if you want to laugh. And then, of course, that takes me to Mustique. I first went to Mustique in 1970. And there you can see Princess Margaret. And I'm on the right in a green swimming thing. I don't know who that man's behind is bending over. I guess it was a waiter. I'm not even sure who the man in the middle was. But Princess Margaret used to go there because it was the one place on the planet where she could go and let her hair down. And I went there many, many times. I first went there with my mother and stepfather, and later on ran the Mustique Blues Festival for 20 years. I started it with my old pal Basil Charles. But on the right is a photograph that was quite infamous, actually. It's Princess Margaret with a wonderful, hysterical guy called John Bindon, who was known as a bit of a villain, I mean, he had been 8 years inside. Anyway, he's wearing a T-shirt borrowed from me, which of course has got "Enjoy Cocaine" written on it, which was quite edgy in those days. Anyway, I introduced them, and there was always lots of talk about did he have an affair with her or not. I put this absolutely clear in my book. You can read that if you want to. But I took the picture and never really got credit for it, but still. But there we are on Mystique. There's Basil Charles, OBE, and he even went to Prince William and Catherine's wedding. And that's his fantastic bar where every night for 15 days every year, up until 5 years ago, when I stepped out of running the festival for 20 years, I used to make an album every year of all the acts. We had great blues on it, and the money raised from selling the CDs went to help Basil Charles's charity. Bottom right is just a little bit of the London Blues Band. On the right is Jake Zeitz, who's my wonderful co-writer on many songs, the guitarist. And on the left, on saxophone, and he also played harmonica, is the man Mike Pace, who's been by my side on stage for nearly 40 years. But sadly, he died a few weeks ago, so there's no longer another one who's in that great rock and roll band in the sky. And there, Mick Jagger gets up and sings one year at the festival. I don't know why I'm squeezed into a tiger skin trouser suit. But anyway, there's Mick doing his thing. And that's really only to show you that it was such a lot of fun. 15 days. My job was to get musicians to come and play for free because it was a charity. It's not that difficult to get musicians to come to a 5-star plus island like Mystique, everything paid for, in the sunshine, in the end of January, when the weather is dreadful everywhere else. So I can now actually say I've produced a couple of tracks with Mick Jagger on it, and Ronnie Wood was also there as well, but more of that later. By this time, this must have been about 1983, I think, I was starting to do not just blues albums, but songs. I'd had a huge #1 hit in Europe. Of course, I couldn't get anyone interested in England to release it. It was a song called Move Your Body Close to Me. And the record company then decided that I could go to Morocco. Yippee! I love Morocco. So I went with and filmed 2 pop videos there. One song called It Belongs to Me, which was actually directed by my then boyfriend Jörg Huber, another one who's not on this planet anymore. And there I am in the Palais Badi, which is in Marrakesh. I can't think what the locals thought of me, singing this other song, I'm in Danger Tonight, which we filmed in the Jnal Fna, the main square in Morocco. I've always loved Morocco. And by this time I was getting spiritual leanings. This happens to people, and I'd read a book on Sai Baba, and Satya Sai Baba is the greatest teacher that had been in India. I mean, this was about 40 years I read the book, and I decided to go and see what on earth was happening. 3 weeks later, I leapt on a plane expecting him to say, I've been waiting for you, let me, here you are, the chosen one. And he actually ignored me for 12 years. But after 12 years of me coming and sitting silently, for his 70th birthday, Sai Baba asked if I would come and sing, and I sang in a stadium, which was, well, you can see that's the 80th birthday actually, and there's Sai Baba, and he sometimes used to wear white at his birthday, but there would be nearly 1 million people there. I mean, you have no idea what it's like to sing in front of nearly 1 million people. It was massive, and I was so lucky. He'd asked me to sing nearly every year from his 70th birthday till his 85th, and or maybe later. As I said, I'm very bad on years, except for 2 years when I was ill, so I couldn't make it. But this year, 2019 is the first year when I haven't been to India because of the virus going on. But normally I would be singing in India, and it means I've also made about 10 albums in Sanskrit, which I learnt over there. It's a type of song called bhajans. And I've got to say that if anyone says to me, what has been the biggest influence in your life, apart from my parents, it's got to be Sai Baba, who completely put me on the right track of life. And okay, we're on to, oh, here's just some happy snaps. Top left is Ronnie Wood, who I've known since 1964, actually, with bending over my friend Jörg Huber, the famous artist. The one in the middle, where I've got an orange and thing round scarf, I'm there with Donald Fagen from Steely Dan, Taken and Mustique. The one top right is me with one of the best drummers ever, Richie Hayward, another one who's playing in that blues band in the sky, but he played in a band called Little Feat. Bottom left is Roger Daltrey from The Who, because I was in a version of Tommy. I played the Acid Queen, which was a lot of fun. The one in the middle was a girls' concert, which is Bonnie Tyler on the right, Chaka Khan in the middle, and me on the left. And the bottom right picture is me with Jimmy Page, because Jimmy Page and Robert Plant came to visit me in 1980 when I was doing a stage show in Vienna. I was doing a lot of work in Vienna then, but at the same time, I also had the London Blues Band. So here you can see me with the London Blues Band on stage at the wonderful 606 Club in Chelsea, which is a place I still play quite often. I'm going to give my band a name check, because the London Blues Band has to be the best on the planet. You've got Dino Baptiste on piano, on keyboards, Jake Zeitz on guitar. The back is Jeff Walker on bass. The drummer is Evan Jenkins, and of course there on the left on saxophone is Mike Pace, who is no longer with us. So these are wonderful guys. And I still record a lot, and this is my last two albums, my latest albums. My 70th album is, or is it my 69th album? I'm getting confused. 69th or 70th is Under My Bed, which I did with the London Blues Band. And I'm really pleased about that. Sadly, we were about to go out and do loads of promo and live gigs to perform with it, but of course, you know, circumstances closed concerts down. And the one on the left is with an Austrian band, Al Cook. And I've always wanted to do very old style blues, the kind of music I grew up on, which is Bessie Smith, all slightly kind of risque lyrics. And this album is very, very old style blues, came out on an Austrian label. And you know what makes me very happy? I wrote a song for it, which I've been wanting to do for a long time. It's called FCK Blues. And the reason I called it FCK Blues is because the punchline of the chorus is FCK Blues, the only thing that's missing is you. Well, I thought it was quite funny. You've got to have a sense of humour in blues, by the way. If you don't have a sense of humour, don't bother to listen to this music. So here I am on my front doorstep with my guitar case, and if you move in closer, you might be able to see some of the stickers and everything. And because I used to travel a lot with my guitar, now I tend to play piano much more. But anyway, so this is me at home. And the address on the right is to do with the book, Weren't Born a Man. Now, if you order on Amazon, you can actually get to see it. You know, here I'm actually with the postcard. I'm all specially signed, which has gone into the version that you can buy, and more unseen pictures. I don't know if you can actually see this. Well, it's actually, you go in on something on the publisher's name, which is Hawksmoor Publishing, and they'll send it to you. But I guess Amazon, I don't know. I'm so old-fashioned, I've never ordered anything online because I don't do anything like that. I leave that for the rest of the world. But if you've enjoyed this little talk and you want to know more, then please go into Hawksmoor and you'll get some great stories, I think. I think that may well be it. Oh, yes, you've got questions and answers. So I'm ready to answer anything. Hit me with them.
Dana, that was so interesting. We have a lot of questions.
Oh, gosh.
That have come through. So Paul Johnson.
Nina, can I just
Yes.
stop for a moment? You've got a bit of an echo, so I don't know whether it might be. Have I got an echo? Anybody?
No.
No, you Could you ask questions then?
Might be better. Sorry about that.
Excellent.
But
Go ahead.
I want to switch your mic off. Sorry, Nina.
All of this techno stuff.
Sorry. Okay, there's a lot of questions, so we'll try and get through some. I've got a bit of an echo, but we'll do our best.
It doesn't sound, neither of you sounded bad to me here, so maybe it's just what you hear, and maybe...
Could be. I'll ask a couple, and then we'll transfer to Nina, just in case one of us is working and one of us isn't. Apologies to people out there. Paul Johnston from Dunfermline, do you have any regrets in life?
None whatsoever. What's the point in regretting? Past is past. I live in the now because it's the best place to be. These days, nobody can make any plans. No, I don't regret. And if anything ever looks in my book, I was asked this today by an interviewer, actually, what I would maybe think about some perhaps dubious choices that I might have made. I've always felt that I've learnt the most from my mistakes. I don't regret anything. And I had a ball. I had a whale of a time. No regrets at all. Non, je ne regrette rien.
That's fabulous. Colin Pritchard, was Keith Moon as mad as the stories make out?
Yes, he was. There's a few pages on him in my book, so yes, he was. I mean, probably not helped by the amount of pills he took, but that's just how he was. He was mad on stage. If you see any old film footage of how he played drums, and I used to be a drummer. I've always had a soft spot for drummers, actually. He played like he had 10 arms and was going bonkers. He was like that on stage and off.
Were you in a production of The Black Mikado at the Oxford Playhouse in the 70s?
No.
Yeah, that's a slightly odd one, but never mind. Bari says, I know you attended the funeral of Mark Bolan, but did you have any interaction with him during 1977 at all?
I had a lot of interaction with Mark Bolan because actually his manager also was a very good friend, Tony Howard. I can't tell you what years I had interaction with him, but we were just friends. And the funeral was quite touching, actually, because, I mentioned this in the book about how he'd given me a minivan, a van, because I've always loved vans. And he knew I didn't have a car, and he said, no, I don't want to drive a Mini because I might die in a Mini. And it's weird, he did die in a Mini, and every time I drive over, which isn't that often, but the bridge in Barnes, where he died, you can still see some flowers sort of pinned there. The funeral was quite sad. I sat in a pew, if that's the right word, right behind Rod Stewart, and Bowie was literally in front of me, and the silence in that place was broken by a terrible wail, a howl of anguish as the coffin was brought in before it went on the flames. And all the fans outside all had mascara running down their faces because, he'd gone. He was a lovely guy, fabulous guy, Mark.
I bet. Yeah, so young. Achincha, I'm probably not pronouncing that right, has said, hi Dana, can you tell more about life in the ashram in India and how you managed to organise such huge concerts in such a rural village?
Oh, that must be Achincha. Well, I never really organised things. When one plays for Sai Baba, it's somehow organised for you. Nobody was more surprised than me that Sai Baba would ask me to go and sing blues over there. But he once said that blues is very spiritual music, and it's very true. Anything that comes from the heart has to be good, and that was one of the main teachings of Sai Baba is that live your life real. Don't try and pretend to be somebody else. And okay, I have sung some of the bhajans, the Sanskrit music in front of Sai Baba, in front of the thousands and thousands and thousands. But he always really liked me to do my Western music because I'm able to get his messages of love across to people that wouldn't normally hear it. I've always said, if I go out and talk about Sai Baba, I preach to the perverted, not the converted, because they already know the teachings about him. I could go on for hours and hours about life in the ashram, but I probably won't, because some people who don't know about Sai Baba, this won't mean that much to you. But my advice is I would try and check him out, because you might be surprised at what you could learn.
Jeff asked, have you had any contact with Bob Dylan since the 60s?
Well, yes, I saw him in the 70s in New York, and of course in 1997, he'd asked me to be his opening act for his British tour. So, yes, I had quite a bit of contact with him, and I've got I'll make it very brief, a nice story. On the final day, he'd insisted that I do the Wembley Arena with him, and that was the one day that my actual drummer then, Chris Hunt, couldn't make the gig because he was booked to play with Lonnie Donegan, and I couldn't get one drummer in London to be free. So I rang the last drummer in my book that I hadn't contacted, and it was Roger Taylor for Queen. And I said, Roger, this is Anna Gillespie. Would you would you come and play for my gig with Dylan? And he said, no problem at all. Can you imagine how my ratings went up when Roger Taylor had his drum kit set up and I came out on stage and there's Roger? To this day, I have to say thank you to Roger, because he wouldn't even take the fee that the paltry support acts get paid. And I love a man who's a cavalier. My mother brought me up to the sentence, manners maketh man. And Roger Taylor had plenty of them, as did Dylan, as it happens.
Keith P asked, did you ever hang out with the Cray twins?
No.
No.
Sorry,
Okay.
Keith, never met them. My world, apart from knowing John Bindon, and I actually have never really known villains. It's not kind of my thing.
This is just putting you in touch with John Burton, who wants to know if you'd be up for being the guest at next year's Dublin Bowie Festival to give a talk.
It's pronounced Bowie, by the way. I mean, yes, I would. I mean, when Bowie had his huge exhibition here, I mean, he obviously wasn't physically here, but at the V&A, the Victoria and Albert Museum, and I remember the queues went around the corner for all the way up the exhibition road, and it was a massively successful exhibition. But they'd asked me if I'd give a talk in the auditorium there, which I did with Holly Johnson and another man called Kevin Cann, and I had to do let's say an hour, and I don't take notes. I don't need notes. I have enough stories on Bowie to last forever. So that fellow who just asked if I would give a talk, yes, if he wants me to, I'm happy to do it. I say yes to anything, actually, if I think people will enjoy what I have to say. And I've got so many stories, and there's so many fans of Bowie. You know, what I can't do is talk about Bowie after 1975, because I never saw him after that. I only know the early years, you know, when he was in America. And I don't really go to America much. I'm very European. I like European food and everything. So I stick to Europe. So, yes, but I'm yes, happy to do anything if I'm asked.
Melissa asked, did you ever do any busking in the 60s or in the 70s, I guess?
No, never did. I guess I would. The nearest I've got to busking is that if I see a busker, I usually put some money in his hat, because I've always thought, there but for the grace of God go I. But no, I never did.
So I guess we probably ought to be wrapping up pretty soon, but Cynthia's asked, long-standing connection to Vienna, are they covered in the book?
Yes, there is, because I ended up doing a play for Mai Zetterling in 1980, and I stayed on. I was there for a long time, first of all because of my friendship with the wonderful artist Jörg Huber, but I sang for 3 years on and off with the Mojo Blues Band, who are very famous over there. And even now, since 1983, I've made albums and do concerts all the time with a fantastic boogie-woogie pianist called Joachim Palden and his trio. So I'm nearly always, well, I was, except for last year when nobody was going anywhere. I was always doing concerts over in Vienna. I have a big love of Vienna, and I speak German, thanks to going there so often. And I hope I'm meant to be going back to sing in a great place called Jazzland in March, but who knows? You can't make plans any longer.
There's a couple of people, both Todd and Brian, basically asking the same question. How are you spending time in this lockdown madness?
Oh, I had a great time. The moment I knew about the lockdown, first of all, I went for an hour and a half walk every morning at 5:30 in the morning just to watch the dawn round Hyde Park, and I realised how much I actually love this city and what a great park it is. Because for 30 years I've been a swimmer every morning. There's a swimming pool around the corner from me, but I can't swim because the pools are closed. So I did a walk. Plus, I was able to work with David Shasha, who's my co-author on so much of this book, was put together chronologically, because I can't remember dates or years or anything. So we worked on finishing the book. That took the whole of the summer. Plus, I wrote with Jake Zeitz, my co-songwriter for this new album, Deep Pockets, which was recorded in the summer. Plus, I finished all the lyrics for another new album, which I worked with a man called Nick Hogarth, and I'm in the studios now working on them. So I've been pretty busy, actually. And I don't mind lockdown. I'm a bit of a loner. You know, I live alone. I mean, I would love to have a pussycat in the house, but you know, so lockdown was no hardship for me. And as long as I can go out walking, and I don't see anyone at 5:30 in the morning because nobody else bothers to get up that early.
Okay, I guess a couple more questions, if you don't mind, because we're slightly funny. Tris says, given you trained as a drummer and a musician, have you considered being a record producer?
I've produced many albums. First of all, I produced all the albums from the Mystique thing, and all the blues albums I do. Well, I can say producer, but of course, the answer all lies in the mixing. And I'm really lucky to work with a guy called Dominic Brett, who has a studios called Wolf Studios. And I think it's about 38 years I've sat next to this man while he touches the machinery, but the production goes on. But when you're lucky enough that you're sitting next to somebody whose judgment and taste you judge, often I don't have to say anything. I mean, occasionally we have some comments with each other, but when you're in tune with each other, then as long as I have a great team around me, and the team is in this case him for mixing and everything, yeah, I love producing. I would be happy to produce other people too, but these days everyone tends to do everything themselves. But I've produced far too many albums. I can't even remember the amount now. I've released though 70 or 71 albums, so that's how much I know about being in studios. I live in studios. It's where I could put down roots in studios.
And I think if we finish, before I hand back to Nina, on a couple of questions from Jennifer.
Okay.
Who's your favourite singer and composer, and what are you planning next?
That's. I mean, it's impossible to answer. I mean, I long to be on Desert Island Discs just so that I could actually could choose 8 songs and things. And my next project, well, I need to finish these 2 albums, Deep Pockets and Smooth Seas. They've got to be mixed and finished, which they will be, I hope, by the end of February. I'm doing the audio book of Weren't Born a Man. The Kindle, I think, has been released, I think, today as well, through Hawksmoor. And the moment I finish an album, I usually think, oh, God, what am I going to do? And then ideas start coming to me, and I start writing more songs. So I'll probably just wait till the gigs open up. All the gigs that I had with the London Blues Band have been shifted and shifted forwards and forwards. So I hope I can actually do some of the concerts, and then I'll be writing a new album. That's what I do. I like to make records and, albums.
Fabulous. Nina.
That's wonderful. Let me try and tune in. I'm sorry for the sound problems, but
You sound normal to me. Any more questions?
There are a lot of questions. Do you want us to try and go through a few more?
Yeah, I don't think we can. What else are we doing tonight? Nothing. If I wasn't just sitting eating.
Nina, you take over.
So how good were the action at the Marquee? They were my favorite 60s band, says Paul Johnson.
I remember the Action. They were great. I mean, they were another band. It was the Action, Gary Fire and the T-Bones, the Yardbirds, and the Who. And there was another band called Blossom Toes. And I was just in there every night. But the Action were great. And I cannot remember the lead singer's name, which is an embarrassment because I used to know them quite well. But they were fabulous. Fabulous.
Fantastic. And Sarah Captain says, Dana, I was also a part of Rita Rocca's documentary London Boy. I was impressed with your Italian. Do go to the Dublin Bowie Festival. It is wonderful, she says, so I'm sure.
Well, I'd go if they invite me. And strangely enough, I watched Rita Rocca's thing, which came out, I think it was only last week, obviously to celebrate, if that's probably the wrong word, Bowie's death and birthday. And it came out on Rai Cinque, on Italian television, but it was really good. She did a fantastic job of it, and this London Boy thing. And I speak Italian because my father used to live on Lake Maggiore, and I go to Italy a lot. And, you know, I've got musical ears. If you put me in any country and you leave me there for a couple of weeks, I'll land up speaking the basics of the language. So my Italian is basic, but, you know, you can get by with charm. People think you speak much better than you do.
Absolutely. I think I'm the follower of the same creed. Italian is so musical, and I've always been convinced that the sense of music, the talent for music, equates to a talent in languages because you just hear it.
So I speak the language of the heart too, Nina. So that's the most important thing, is to speak the language of the heart. And then anyone, I've been sent, this is actually to do with the Sai Baba crowd, all over the world, from literally Kyrgyzstan, Siberia, Dagestan, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, America, Australia, all these places. And I speak to, well, obviously not America and Australia, but I speak in these countries. I have translators actually with me, but people respond to the language of the heart. So that's the most important language to speak.
Thank you, that's wonderful. I fully agree.
Questa è Sara Captain che mi ha aiutato.
Can we, Oubliette would like to know, did you see Lazarus, the Bowie musical? And if so, what did you think of it?
Was that the one that came in, that was showing in England soon after?
The last album that came out a couple of days before his death,
yeah,
I think.
Well, I went to see the show when it was at, where was it?
Oh, the show, yeah.
It was at King's Cross, and the reason I went actually is I work sometimes with a piano player called Matt Guest, who was one of the keyboard players in it, and so I went to see it, and I thought it was quite impressive, I must say. In a way, I mean, there's lots of tracks of Bowie that I've liked, but I was so connected with him in the early years that the later stuff I don't really sit and listen to. Well, I don't really sit and listen to Bowie stuff because of being so close to the early years. So it's songs from, before, from Ziggy Stardust backwards, that I have more of a connection with.
I see. So a couple of people have questions like, what is your funniest memory with Bowie? What is your last memory of time spent with Bowie?
Funny. When I think about Bowie, I'm not actually thinking about a barrel of laughs, actually. Although we did laugh a lot. I mean, especially in the early days, And I'm talking about the 60s, just hanging out when he had his... I suppose the funny thing actually was when he did stay the night, which I mentioned this, when I was 14 or something, and I had to introduce him to my parents the next morning, and they shook hands with him, and when he walked off, my father said, I thought it was a girl. I thought you'd had a girl staying the night in your bed.
Questa è la cosa più curiosa di Bowie, ricordo lei ha detto questa qui.
Pick me up from school and carry my ballet shoes. I don't know that funny is not really...
quelli, raccontati milioni di volte.
Rib tickling episodes with him, but he was a lot of fun to be with. I never had hassles with him because... I wasn't married to him for a start, which made life a whole lot easier.
Parlato pure di Margaret, ho visto le foto.
What was the other bit of the question?
Insieme a Mystique.
we can go, I think people wanted to know what was your last memory, what was your happiest memory with him, but I suppose
last memory I could say probably was really at the end of the Diamond Dogs tour. We all went back to New York, and by this time he was pretty wasted and tired and thin and wired, and he just
Thin White Duke, was it?
Yes, exactly, Thin White Duke times. And then once I came back to England, I never saw him again. But I've always known, a lot of the people that I'd known who became really, really famous, years can go by and I don't see them. And if I suddenly bump into them, whether it's Jagger or Jimmy Page or whatever, it's as if time has not, has stood still. You carry on where you met them last time. I have never thought of all these people I've never thought of as global stars. They were just my pals who I met along the way.
I must say, you depict that time in London with beautiful panache and color. And I can just imagine this swinging London of the 60s where everything's possible. I mean,
Yes.
It still is a very exciting, vibrant city, maybe not in the COVID situation, but that is something that you think it's a wonderful time to have been alive. You were really lucky to have lived through such rich experiences. So this far, it's been very exciting. Somebody wants to know, are you planning any more books? I wanted to know, how was it for you expressing yourself in words? Because you obviously are very good at expressing yourself through music, through dance. Okay, you said through film, not so in your own estimate. But how was it writing the book?
Well,
Tommy.
it had its moments. I mean, I started
Danny.
it about 8 years ago. It
Good
went through
job.
various different versions. I thought it was some stories actually to do volume 2 because there were so many stories that had to be cut out. The publisher who was kind of editing of it, James, he said if I don't take out some of the stories, people are going to lose the will to live because they won't be able to pick up the book. It'll be physically heavy. Because you can't make a book far too long. So that does leave the option open for volume 2, but it's a bit soon to do it.
Dai.
Writing it, I'm not very good with techno stuff. So, I mean, I use a computer like a typewriter. So it was very difficult for me to find
Valerio,
dates
este
and
de
facts and everything, which was where, of course, David Shasha came in, so invaluable. Because if I would say, I think I was vaguely doing something at a gig in, let's say, in 1973, and he immediately would know, no, you were there or you weren't there, because I can't remember these things. I think I was probably having too much of a good time. So it was nice to have a little bit of assistance there. The actual physical typing, I'm slow. I'm a 2-finger typer. I'm very impressed when I see young people who are able to send messages on their mobile telephones with their thumbs. I just stick one finger on it and pray that something's going to work.
Well done. Francesco Donadio wants to know, which year did you support Dylan? He didn't catch that bit in your presentation.
I think it was 1997. I think it was 1997. Again, I'm very hazy. That's why if people want to know these things, they've got to get the book because all the facts are actually more correct than if you sit and ask me them. I just know what it was like to be on tour with him. What an honor. What a joy to be on tour with Dylan and for him to say how much he liked my songwriting. I mean,
he's a Nobel Prize winner after all. I mean, how many Nobel Prize winners can you find yourself on stage with?
And the rest. Yes.
Exactly. So somebody says, hi from Vienna, Michael front desk. Maybe this is some code language. Are you going to bring your book next time to Jazzland or do I have to get it shipped?
I think people probably should order from Hawksmoor. The trouble is the books are physically quite heavy. The hardback is quite heavy. The softback is a little bit lighter, but it's heavy, so I'm not sure that I'm due to be in Jazzland in the middle of March, but people should, I mean, these days everyone does everything online. I'm the only fossil that doesn't do anything online. And I have to remind people that I drive a car with wind down windows and a cassette machine. And I refuse to get into the modern world because I'm not interested in life online. But if you want the book, my suggestion is order it online, because I won't be carrying, my luggage is going to be weighed down by my clothes. And I'm usually carrying CDs. I know people don't even buy CDs anymore, but they do at blues clubs. So I might have one or two copies. But don't forget though that if you do order it and you go to Hawksmoor, you're going to get this. It's signed by me and this special card with some extra pictures. So I do it that way. If you've got any sense.
Yes, sounds like a good plan, that. There's Tony Bell from Brooks Blues Bar.
Oh, yes. Hi, Tony.
He says, "Hi, Dana. Love you madly, and this is a gorgeous launch. Utterly devastated at the recent loss of Mike Pace. And although irreplaceable, do you have anybody in mind to try to fill his place in your band? Many kisses. P.S. Need a copy of Take It Off Slowly, please." Pretty please, it seems.
Well, again, people have to order online, although I do have a copy here somewhere of Take It Off Slowly. And sadly, Brooks Blues Bar, which is a place I have played with Dino Baptiste and Jake Zeitz, it's nowhere's open at the moment. What was the beginning bit of the question? I've forgotten. Oh yeah, Mike Pace. Yeah, Mike Pace, of course, the marvelous sax player. The trouble is he's very difficult to replace. Saxophone is not the problem. Mike Pace was an absolute virtuoso with harmonica. And where do you find two instruments in one man? And a lot of my songs have always needed harmonica. So I have got a couple of sax players in mind. And on the latest record, Deep Pockets, we used an amazing player called Tom Muller. He's great, but he lives in Vienna. And of course, there's Martin Winning, who lives in England. There's a few of them, but it's really who's around at the time. I have to see, but to find somebody who plays a harmonica as well, that's going to be difficult shoes to fill. And I'm going to Mike Pace's funeral, actually, on Wednesday week, 27th. He used to play Jules Holland.
I'm very sorry to hear that you've had suffered a loss.
Well, do you know, I don't see loss like everyone else does, because I've known so many people who've died. It's just, they've moved on, and I'll be...
And you've had Sai Baba for your friend, so...
Yes, Sai Baba has really taught me the best way to look at death, because it's a blink of an eye. I'm quite... obviously, I'm going to miss Mike Pace on stage, but he played on so many albums that he's with me, forever. And my whole band came with me and played in India at Sai Baba's birthdays. So, I'm connected. So I don't see death like most other people do. And I've always said that my father always used to say to me, if you've got a choice between going to a wedding or a funeral, go to the funeral, because at least you'll know the outcome. Let's face it, how many people do you know have got married and they're divorced within 5 years? So I don't view death as so terrible.
Fantastic. You have offers coming in. There's Todd Sharpville, who says, "Dana, will you join me for an interview and musical guest appearance with my band at my new recording broadcasting facility in Camden? It would be lovely to catch up properly. It's been far too long. We start filming at the beginning of February, so sending you much love." So
well, I'm around, but I'm in the studios actually, singing and mixing and whatever for the next few weeks. But yeah,
okay. It's a bit naughty. They want to get me. Sorry.
I don't think anyone's allowed to travel anywhere at this moment in time, though. I don't know.
Exactly. There were a couple of questions relating to that, how you're coping with COVID. Does writing your book now, being engrossed in publicizing it at the moment, does that help you look to the future, thinking about the past? Does it help you see the light at the end of this particular tunnel with the pandemic?
No, well, the thing is, I have a sunshine disposition. I'm happy and cheerful. I mean, it must drive other people nuts, but I'm actually cheerful and happy. So I haven't ever felt lonely or down or going bonkers through this pandemic because I can look out the window. I can go for a walk. I eat well. I've got melodies going on in my head. I've got great memories. So I'm never bored. There's books to read, there's songs to write, there's things to think about. I've got birds to feed. I've got green parrots that swing on my tree outside. I've got stuff to do all day long. I've got friends. I'm never, ever unhappy anymore. Even when, some of my best friends in the world have died, I'm not unhappy because it's just another chapter in life. And I think people have to wise up and not cling to possessions and things that they think are important. Nothing is important. Only love is important, and how to spend love. Oh, look, my telephone's ringing. I might tell them to get lost.
Oh, gosh.
Okay, hang on. Hello? I can't talk. I'm on the line. Can you call me in 15 minutes? Thank you. Oh, do you know, that's a good friend of mine, Michael Liner. And of course, I was meant to be going in 10 days' time to go and stay in Mustique with him and his wife, because I still have very strong connections with Mustique. And this morning I cancelled me going because there's no way I can go jetting off. I actually follow the government's rules. I believe in what's going on here. I'm not one of those people that say that COVID doesn't exist, because I had it myself over Christmas, but I was lucky. I only had 4 days of discomfort and then spent 2 weeks in bed over Christmas and New Year. The perfect place to be, watching, boring television. Well, something on television. Great. I feel fantastic now.
Anna, that sounds wonderful. Thank you so much for your time. You've given us half an hour more than you promised to begin with. There are some outstanding questions which you can go back to afterwards, but let me say good night to the many people who joined us tonight, and to thank you so much for choosing us to be your vessel to bring your book into the world. I hope you'll come and join us again to do another event of your choosing. But for
my next book, you mean? I have got another book called Mirrors of Love, but it's a book of quotations that was inspired by Bob Dylan, who actually, when he was here, he wanted books on quotations, and so it's an art book. But I might do another book. So yes, Nina, I'll be back, because you only promote books, don't you?
No, we can promote anything you want. We can promote you. So this has been an hour where we heard bits about your life. If you want to do some more events about different aspects of what you did we will definitely we can talk. I'm up for anything.
I'm happy to do anything. Of course, I need technical support. I've got it here with because I don't touch machinery, as you know, being such an old fossil. But if anyone wants to, and if they want to write into you and have some suggestions, I'm happy to chat away till the cows come home, because that's what I enjoy doing. And it's fun, and I hope all the listeners have been having a good time as well.
I am sure they have been having a good time. I'm going to send a feedback request right after we finish here with the links to your book, and we'll ask for comments, because sadly in this format it is very hard for you to gauge how people are responding, because I know all you see is your slide. But believe me, we had a large audience tonight, and judging by the number of questions, people really engaged with your story. So let me go, Dana.
Well, thank you. I mean, I would say goodbye. I've got two ways of saying goodbye. One might be when I'm being rather flippant, and I would say peace and love and five-star hotels, which is kind of tongue-in-cheek. But in fact, my real way of saying goodbye would be to say start the day with love, spend the day with love, fill the day with love, and end the day with love. And if you live like that, your life is going to go a whole lot better. So I'll see you all next time if you ask me back.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dana. Good night, everyone.
Good night.